Hello, hi everyone, hi-fi people. I want to just talk today about what happens when you try to go up the hi-fi ladder. Yeah, when you try to make things better and you spend more money, and sometimes it's disappointing. And I think what I want to point out from the start is I think the middle ground is the disappointing area. And I'm going to just say a few things about how I think you can get around that, or what you should do, or how to avoid this sort of snakes and ladders. Like you're going up, you're doing well, shunk, and sometimes you go, God, I thought this was going to be really good. So equipment can be disappointing. Now, let me just talk about systems, because it seems to me that one of the biggest problems you can have is, you have a system, you've got a DAC, a streamer, a preamp, and a power amp, and maybe, a power supply and whatever other things. Then you've got cables to add another variable into the whole equation. I mean, the point is, it can be quite hard to nail down what is good and what is not good in your system, whether the cables are doing this or the preamp's doing that. So the first thing I think is worth saying is that try to nail this down. If you can, borrow some equipment off a friend or a shop or whatever you can do, but try to nail down what is sounding good. If you swap your speakers with someone else and you go around their house and go, oh, these speakers sound great here, they don't sound that good in my house, right? So the speakers are quite good, and maybe so it's probably the other end is your problem, or the amp, or whatever it is, but try to nail it down. Use headphones on your amp, listen to other amps. That amp headphone socket will pretty much give you what your amp sounds like. I mean, if I was building a system, making a system from scratch, I would make sure I had a good amp and I knew that amp was good. Because if you know that the amp is good, then everything else you don't have to doubt that part, because you've got all these different parts. So you might start going, is it this, is this, is this? It's hard to work it out, so if I know I've got a good amp, that's what I would aim for finding out and making sure that bit is sound. You can have the best speakers in the world, but if your amp is no good, it won't sound very good. So swap things around, investigate, spend time. You have to be analytical about this. You don't let someone play you a record, a tune, a song, because they know that song sounds great. That's not what you want to hear. You want to play your song and know what that song sounds like, and listen to it in different through different systems, because some records make everything sound good, and then it's no way, science, how they say only change one thing. That's a scientific experiment, isn't it? If you change two things, you can't tell what's happening. So that's one thing. What else would I say? I mean, the other thing I want to say is the middle ground of hi-fi. And when I say that, I'm talking about things where the amp is 500, 700. The speakers are 5, 7, 800, maybe up to 1,000, Well, I kind of feel this is the dodgy area. I feel like it may be worth just going for broke and getting an amp that is really great, like a $2,000 amp, let's say $2,000 new, or some old amp that is really great, and know that that's good, and then you can work on that without doubting that bit. But I think the truth is, if you're really going to want to get high end into the real world of detail, finely finessed, different from the cheaper sound, which can be enjoyable, and a vintage sound, enjoyable and big and bouncy. robust, large, but not super refined. But if you want to get into that refined world, I think you have to go for broke. I think you have to, really go and get something properly good. And I feel like there's a lot of iffy or okay stuff in that middle ground. Just not, it's just not that great. Just not that great for 700 quid. New, I'm talking these prices. So or, and this is, I mean this seriously. Ask yourself a question: is it worth it? Is it worth trying to get up this hi-fi ladder? The funny thing is, when I read magazines, I don't know if they say this so much these days, but they would always say things like upgrade, go from the B4 to the B6, from the same make. That's a way to waste money. I've got to say that is a way to waste money. Same company, but just slightly bigger amp. You bought 2 amps, and you're probably, going to get like 50-30% for your original amp, so that whole upgrading thing, maybe you should just get something really good. I mean, it's not that I can tell you, oh, you should buy this amp or these speakers, they're fantastic, which is the other thing, which is matching things. Matching things is massive. It's just massive. Those speakers with that amp in that room, possibly, but maybe I shouldn't even say in that room, but those speakers in that amp can be a certain winner. I mean, myself, I don't really buy into the idea of, let's say, name amp, name speakers, name CD player. I feel like you're just getting too much of the same. I mean, that's me, because I feel like I want to tamper with things more, or I know what I'm doing, let's say. But personally, I'm not a fan. I haven't bought into that idea for decades, really, because they have a certain sound in companies, that they're after. And, most times I think, okay, you've got that kind of sound, your bass light, I want bass heavy speakers. Your amps are bass heavy, I don't want bass heavy speakers. So, it's just me. I just personally don't buy into that same company thing. I don't feel like that works out properly myself. What else would you say? I mean, the world of cables is an interesting one. Cables, to me, they're like tweaking things. I mean, they're useful, I would say. Okay, if you've got a system, you go, well, I'm going to try changing it. I'm half happy, I'm nearly happy, but let me try some different cables. Again, if you can borrow cables, this is really great. But sometimes that can, move the dial from okay to good, or it can go the other way too. I can tell you, it can be a downgrade. I mean, the thing with changing things is, what most times happen is, you buy a new one, you stick it on, you maybe sold the old one, or you just take that off. But you're sort of always hoping or thinking that let's say you bought a new amp, you're thinking that new amp is better. The truth is, it might be worth put your new amp on, listen to that for a week. In that first week, you'll probably notice the new things of your new amp, and you won't notice the things that it isn't doing. You'll notice the things it is doing. So change back. I mean, it's a horrible thing to do. You might change it back to your old amp and go, oh, actually my old amp sounds better. But I mean, that's really the best way to find out what's going on. Don't just put it on and don't change it back if you've still got it in the house. I would change it back, and then I do it 3 days. Have it on for days, and you do that a few times. You will in the end have a preference. You will have a definite preference. Whether you articulate or not, you just kind of know it. Like if I have say 3 amps, that's all I had, I'd land up just with the best amp. The one I liked would be the one that stays on. I just mess around with them and suddenly I go, oh yeah, it's that amp. I'm always playing that amp. Oh yeah, I must like it. It's just, just it'll do it whether you like it or not. So yeah, the whole thing about going high end, I think it's a rocky road. It's a minefield. Things can go wrong. The progress is erratic. Yeah, it is not a straight up slope. Spend more money, get better. It's about matching, and some gear is better than others. And some gear they say is really good, and it isn't. I'll say that quite frankly and clearly now, and everyone shouts at me for certain things that I say are no good, like the Kef LS50s. I don't like them one bit, and I play them to people in this house. I sold them now, but I've always played them to people, and everyone goes, what? These aren't any good. I don't like this. That happened all the time. And people will say, I have read so much that these are great speakers. But if you've read it, it doesn't mean anything. It's just writing and stars. You can't trust it. You just can't trust that, So be careful. But I would say if you want to go high end, you're probably going to have to go for broke. Make sure you get some really great amp. Might cost you a ton of money, but then you can go, right, this is good. And you'll know it's good, and put headphones on, just cross-reference it, test it as much as you can. But if you get something that's really good, you've got a good building block, and now you can, okay, if I put some speakers on, they don't sound good, it's the speakers. It's not that amp. And then, make a decision kind of, do you want to do this? Even though it's a bit fun, I like it, you know what I mean? But, it's a rocky road, and I think the middle is the dangerous place. And the real high end is expensive, but it is good. And a lot of stuff in the middle is dubious, and you've got to match things and be analytical about your testing of individual items, Okay, I think that's it. I mean, this Croft that I will review soon, it's quite classy, and so is this. I'm not that mad about them. I mean, they have fine qualities. They're maybe in that middle ground, really. It just doesn't quite, maybe you got to go more, got to go higher, and then you'll be happy, Okay, all right. That's my thoughts on going high end. Bye for now.